my absolute pleasure to introduce our guests today. One is for a very personal reason. I'll get to that in a minute. Mr. Jeff Roberson, who is on your far right, he is a native of Baldwin. He lives in Oxford, is a graduate of the University of Mississippi. He has been an assistant sports director of the Oxford Eagle and editor of the Ole Miss Spirit. He assists as an archivist and historian for Ole Miss athletics and has covered Ole Miss sports for more than 30 years. He has taught writing classes in the School of Journalism and New Media at Ole Miss, and he is co-author, along with his first cousin, the late Pontotoc native Jim Weatherly of Midnight Train, which chronicles the life of Weatherly as an all-SEC quarterback at Ole Miss through his songwriting career and induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in New York. In 2025, Roberson completed, along with co-author Chase Parham, Stories from Ole Miss Baseball for Nautilus Publishing of Oxford. He's also assisted Nautilus with other books, including Stories from 125 Years of Ole Miss Football in 2019. So, Mr. Roberson. Chase is mine. That's exactly what I tell people. Chase is mine. That's how it starts. I taught Chase almost 26 years ago. He was in the first class I ever taught ever at Hatley, Mississippi. And I have his senior picture in my office to prove it, along with a signed copy of his first book. And I now have a signed copy of his next book. Chase, before I get into the brass tacks, he taught me what it means to be a teacher. That it's more than the curriculum, that you really need to know who the person behind the desk is. And all Chase wanted to do was be a sports journalist for Ole Miss. And here he is. He's done that and then some. And I'm not going to cry. But he is my life changer, capital L, capital C. That's what I call him. That's what I sign his happy birthdays. That's what I sign everything. He is my life changer. And that's enough about that. He accomplished everything he wanted to do, and he has far exceeded all of that. And his sweet mother and second daddy are up here today. He has got all the support in the world. He is currently with 247 Sports, CBS Sports, co-owner of MPW Digital, Mississippi's most downloaded podcast network. Previously, he was employed by Rivals.com, Yahoo, ESPN, Scout.com. That's a big deal if y'all don't know all that. He was the 2006 Daily Mississippian Sports editor. He was the ICC Chieftain editor from 2002 to 2004. He got the ICC Journalism Department Award. He is the Ole Miss Alumni Association inaugural class of Top 40 Under 40. We've discussed this morning. He no longer.
I'm 41 now, so yeah, it's over.
He's 41. And y'all, I was only 8 years older than he was when he taught me. I was, yeah, it's crazy to me that I was just a little baby person out of college. But anyway, here we are. He's 41 now. An MC for Ole Miss Club Hall of Fame. He's published 2 books, Resilient Rebels, Ole Miss Baseball's Remarkable Path to a National Title, and Stories from Ole Miss Baseball, which is what got us here today. So, a hand for my Chase, please.
Well, Chase, Jeff, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Great crowd out today. I know it's been a great day for you guys. And just real quick before we jump into the questions, just talk about the day and how it's gone so far.
Yeah, it's been fabulous just to be back in general. I got an opportunity a couple years ago, I guess now, to serve on the Humanities, School of Humanities alumni board or advisory board, whatever we're calling it. Sorry, and it's been a great honor and blessing for me because I told somebody earlier today that I do a lot of things at Ole Miss and I do things other places, but this is where I got my start. And coming back and the level that people care and that really there's a connection that is deeper and bigger and that I really care about the place. So it's been an honor for me to be here to spend this day. Thanks for everybody who helped organize it, obviously Masha, and just to see people make new connections, to network, and hopefully teach some of the students things that I knew at the time and things that I didn't know at the time that I wish I did. So that's kind of where I'm at today.
Absolutely. Jeff?
Well, it's really good to be here, and thank all of y'all for being here, and I'm glad to be on board with Chase and Adam. I'm not an ICC alum, but I am from Baldwin, so I am in the neighborhood. So it is great to be here, and we've had a good day so far, and looking forward to this, and I think it'll be fun.
So we're talking about the book, Stories from Ole Miss Baseball. And Jeff, let's start with you. What was the original inspiration for the book? Was it a particular game, maybe a player, or maybe an idea that kind of sparked this concept for you?
Well, I think the main inspiration for this book, and there were a couple of them in this state about the same time, but the one in 2022 was Ole Miss's national championship, and that kind of sparked some other books, and then this too. And so that kind of put us over the top to be able to do something that we think and hope is special in this book of stories. And it is a story book. It is a book of shorter stories where, you can enjoy them and read them and maybe not have to go through the whole book and, just take your time and read it. But the inspiration for it is, I guess I've covered Ole Miss baseball for 35 years. And as I put in my bio a couple places, I think I've covered over 1,000 games. So I was a little inspired. I told Coach Bianco one day, not too long ago, I said, I've spent more time at Oxford University Stadium, Swayze Field, than any place in Oxford but my house. So, that was kind of my inspiration. And to be able to do it with Chase was special.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the lead up for me is we had talked about this for a while, and you need the right environment for the book. You are trying to sell it. There is that. And the title gave that in 22, but beyond that, and I'm not just saying this, it was to work with Jeff. Jeff hired me for my first job out of college, my first full-time job, and we've covered so many games together in years. And in a lot of ways, we've defined our professional career by baseball and baseball coverage. And to do that with him was an important thing for me to do at this step of my career and at this point in time. And then the other part is that Ole Miss baseball, there's a rhythm to Oxford in the spring when it's good. And it has a tangible personality to it in so many different ways. And I thought, hey, we can tell this for fans young or old, stories of how we got here, why it matters. And Jeff's exactly right. I mean, Mississippi State's very similar. They win the title in 21, and Starkville has the same kind of rhythm. And this is a college baseball state. So how do we show and how do we prove that it's not just an era, but it's a special thing that's happened from the beginning? And we go all the way back to 1871, I think, is the first story in this book. And it really does. It tells stories of ebbs and flows, but there's so many personalities and so many important people that why do people love this team? Why do people love this program and this town in the spring because of it? And what can we show that, really defines why people care and why they fill up the stadium every single weekend?
Now, one thing my coaches don't like about me here is you'll say something that make me think of another question that's not on the list. So I apologize in advance for that. But you talked about stories from the 1800s. How did you go find those, confirm those, and, just legitimize those?
I'll take that, Chase, because Chase and I discussed this a good bit, especially from his point of view, which was originally, and you may have heard her say, I worked on a book called Stories from 125 Years of Ole Miss Football. That was back in 2019. Several of us worked on that book. And this one, I wanted to call Stories from 150 Years of Ole Miss Baseball. Chase kind of pointed out a few things why we might not should call it that. And so I was very comfortable not calling it, putting the number on it. So, as far as, because we couldn't really go back and get a lot of stories from that far back, yearbooks, there was a book called that Dr. David Sansing, a former historian at Ole Miss and a history teacher, had written a sesquicentennial book, 150 Years of Ole Miss. And so we got some stories out of there. Long story short, we were able to find some old stories because there are not too many people that were hanging around the 1800s that are still here. But it worked out well, so because we got a few in there, and then we were able to pick up about World War II, 1950s. There's still some people in Oxford and other areas that played on some baseball teams in the 1950s at Ole Miss and on College World Series teams. So it was a few pages early, and then it got to be more of a modern book after that. So Chase had a good idea about not calling it 100.
Well, here's the benefit, too, is nobody can prove you wrong. So if you have a story from 1890, one person goes, hey, I think this is what happened. Sounds good. It's a great story. It's going in the book. We're done right there. So there is a lot of that that
it would have to be somebody's great-grandchild or something that said, no, that's not right.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of piggyback off that. So that was, you talking about the book name change from there. Were there any other type of changes that went on the concept from the original to the final draft to it being published? Did you change anything or any storylines or any ideas along the way?
My biggest thing, and Jeff and I discussed this a lot, was that because you didn't have a ton of information from the beginning. Let's not organize it where we feel like we have something from every year or to make it read like an encyclopedia. Let's just simply document the years, but make it more along the way. And I think we made it a little more casual in that aspect. And it was a huge change that I think went for the good there, because we were playing off the football version of this book that was very much this year, then this year, then this year. And we show the year, but it's not so locked into that concept. Let's just find the best stories. Let's talk to as many people as we can, and then let's go from there. And like you said, there's a few from really early on. The very first story in the book from 1871 is one of my favorite things there, just because it shows the time period. Because Ole Miss on their athletics website says that baseball started in 1893. But as he said through Dr. Sansing, they tracked it back to 1871, where Ole Miss had played a game in Holly Springs in 1871. And there's this letter that's in the book it is one of my 5 favorite things from the book. And it's a letter from one of the team members to the Lyceum, to the chancellor president of Ole Miss, asking to play a game in Water Valley on a Friday night. And this is like 1875. And he promises 2 things. He says, we will be back for class on Monday and we'll stay away from the whiskey. And that's the 2 things they said. And sure enough, they go, they play the game. They sent a faculty rep with them. They didn't let them go by themselves. And he
Chaperone.
Chaperone. And they go, hey, how does that work? But I guess they were taking horse and buggy. Even though it's just Water Valley, there was a process to that. So, we were able to, in some ways, even identify earlier time periods than the university currently recognizes.
One thing in that same section of the book, it also said that the students were getting smarter and smarter. They made the faculty honorary members of the baseball team, so they got in good with them that way. So we found some things like that were kind of good for the book.
Well, let's just piggyback off that as well. Are there any stories that maybe you didn't know about, or maybe some that you talk about are your favorite stories that are in the book? Just some of those talking points or stories in the book that may maybe intrigue some other people that they may not know about.
Go ahead, Joe.
There is one that I'll tell you that jumped out at me immediately, and it would probably be a part of almost everybody in this room, considering most people in here, I'm thinking, are Ole Miss or Mississippi State. Now, there's some others, I'm sure. But in 1918 and 1919, a man named Dudy Noble was the head baseball coach at Ole Miss. And Dudy Noble is really a Mississippi State guy and spent all of his career otherwise at Mississippi State. And for most of you that would know, the baseball field at Mississippi State is called Dudy Noble Field, named after an Ole Miss baseball coach. How about that? But in the true aspect of the rivalry, Dudy Noble's famous quote, which we have in the book, is, "I know what hell is like. I coached at Ole Miss."
It's not a story, but it's the opportunity of being able to quote and tell the experiences of the people. Because look, if you're a baseball person in general, you're going to know Don Kessinger and Jake Gibbs, and 2 guys that are the only two-sport All-Americans in Ole Miss's history. But you're talking about a long major league careers. Don Kessinger, 6 All-Star games, 2 Gold Gloves, one of the faces of the Cubs through a generation. And Jake, who's maybe one of the most gifted storytellers in Mississippi history. And Jeff and I had the ability to have hours and hours and hours of conversations with them and hear the stories, and then find a way to document them for people all throughout the book, because they're littered through the book. Because when you're doing a book like this, there's 20 people that you absolutely have to talk to. And then it gets kind of hard because there's these 100 or these 100, and you can't include everybody. So where are you finding the stories? But you knew that you had so many great anecdotes from Jake and Donnie and Robert Kayat and guys like that, they're getting up in age too. You want to make sure that you can document those things before it's too late to do that, whether it's just memory loss or whatnot. And, one of the best things about that is with Jake Gibbs, we talked to him for 6-7 hours. We thought we had every story, and we've done this 1,000 times. And he calls and says, "Hey, there's one more thing. Let's go back over there real quick." And he goes, "Hey, did I tell you about the time I got cussed out by Ted Williams?" And we're like, we did 10 hours of this, and a Major League Baseball Hall of Famer, and he starts telling that story, and he's always just got one more. And I thought, there is something to really books in general, that it's the only thing we do that doesn't go away almost immediately. We do a podcast, we write stories, everybody moves on in a day. But there's a certain living history to a book, and to be able to document and hear from those personalities and those experiences was by far the most special part.
Absolutely, and we do actually have a connection then, because Jake's grandson, Luke, played baseball here.
Yeah.
So I got that little ICC and Ole Miss tie there as well. You kind of touched on this earlier. How did you guys come together to collab on this book?
Well, we covered baseball and sat closer together than this for many, many years in a press box is one thing. And we've traveled a lot together. And so, we went to Omaha on the World Series trip and hung out together for those 11 days up there. And so it was, I think for us two to be able to do this book made a lot of sense in a lot of ways. And we were just excited to be able to do it. So, collaborating together and some of our stories, many of them, we've experienced the same things, especially the last 20 years since Chase has been involved with Ole Miss Baseball. But, there's some stories in there about, so many things that we've been through together, and it just made a good fit that we knew that we were the two that should pick this up and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can call whether this is a good or bad thing, but we've defined so much of our careers by it. I don't think there were two other people that could have written the book, frankly. I will say that at this point.
I didn't get quite to that point.
Yeah,
but
sure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. It is what it is.
I figured there was somebody, but I didn't
Yeah.
know who it might.
So players, coaches, administrators, a lot of people helped put into this. You've already talked about a few, but who are some other people that really helped pour it into this project?
Well, one thing I want to say on that just to begin with is that when you do a book like this or a project like this, rarely, maybe never, does anybody say, I don't want to be a part of it. All those players, all those former coaches, they all want to be involved in it. So that makes it pretty easy from the get-go. And a lot of the things that we did were we went back and reached to some of our own old stories or former stories or stories from the past that we had written for me in the 1990s at the Oxford Eagle or at the Ole Miss Spirit when I worked there for 20 years. And so, it was easy to get to people, to talk to them and find old stories. So that was part of it. Chase, you might want to add some things to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as he said, everybody wants to be a part of it. People like talking about themselves. They love telling their stories. They love, reminiscing and having reunion types and playing off of each other in those ways. The biggest thing was let's not tell something had happened, but let's try to find some emotion in it. And I think that was one of the keys too. And Jeff gave me this advice, I think, from the football book was sometimes you call somebody and go, hey, just tell me something I don't know. And it can be that simple of figuring out, this is a great journalism communication tool, is just simply tell me something that would be on your mind or what's the best thing. And, even somebody like Stephen Head, the only 3-time All-American in program history, where I felt like I'd known all of his stories and we'd all written and whatnot, I asked that and started with it, and he led into something that I didn't know. And he thought, okay, that's the way to get to beyond documenting, but telling and finding some emotion in the story.
And Adam, here's one example that I'll give, and some of you may know this particular person. I know some in here do, but there's a pitcher from Tupelo named Will Klein, and Will Klein pitched at Ole Miss about 20 years ago, and Will Klein struggled as a pitcher for a little while, and he had gone through some things, and I didn't know all the reasons or the backstory or anything like that. But when I called Will to talk to him about what turned his career around and some of the things that he went through to get to become an ace on the Ole Miss pitching staff back in 2006 and 2007, he said the magic words, "Let me tell you all about how I got to that point." And that was all I needed to hear because I didn't know any of that. And that gave me the whole story that I needed because I knew a lot of it, but I didn't know the things that he was about to tell me. So if you can get somebody that's that quick to say, let me tell you all of this, then you're in good shape.
And Will's got one of the best quips because he said when he was really bad before he got good, he was on the mound, he was pitching, and Mike walked out. Mike Bianco, Mrs. head baseball coach now for 25 years. He walked out and told Will, he goes, "It's really okay. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault for sucking. It's my fault for recruiting you." And he went, "Okay, that's where we are." So he said sometimes, and he said he got me back going a little bit. We all laughed and we shared a moment. We went from there. So.
Yeah.
So are there any stories that didn't make the book that you guys may want maybe to share now or anything like that? Because there's always that tough editing process where you got to condense things, cut things back, and
Are you asking, is there a volume 2?
No,
is there a volume 2?
Jeff was incredibly paranoid about leaving everybody out because there was, like as I said, there's no way you're not. So it's just your biggest worry because your heart sinks because you want to have everybody involved is somebody walking up to you and going, "Hey, I can't wait to read your book and read about my uncle, dad, whatever." You go, "Man, he's not in the book." Well, you go, "Nah, that doesn't happen." Because that happened to me with the 22 book.
Right.
I write about the national title, and I had a mom contact me and send me a text and go, "Hey, my son's in it, right?" No, not so much.
Yep.
Not at all. So
Yeah, and that really
that's
that
the
bothered me a
worry.
lot, that we were going to leave somebody out, or we were going to forget something, or that we should have put something in. And I got to admit, it still kind of does. Doesn't seem to bother Chase as much, but I think about it too much probably. But I think what we presented was hopefully a good book, and what we left out.
So how does this book differ from your other books?
Completely different. In 2022, you can write a book about any championship team. They do it. It's all the time. But that season was emotional and strange and had so many different dramatic elements that it actually deserved a book. And there's a difference between writing a book because a team won, where it's just simply a commemorative. Because you can do that where everybody's going to buy it and it's a great Christmas gift and we're just going to celebrate the team that went 60-10. But for that book, you had a head coach that was going to be fired. I knew the day that Mike was going to be fired. They were dead last in the SEC. They were 7-14 in the SEC going into the month of May. They had lost 2 out of 3 at Arkansas, and he held a team meeting and told his coaches, "Look, I know we're probably done, but show up every day, do the best you can, because at the end, if we get fired, we at least say we tried every day, we didn't leave anything out there, we won't have any regrets in doing so." Basically, I know your wives are upset, I get it, but this is where it's at. At the same time, they've got an outfielder whose mother has been told she has 2 weeks to live. 2 weeks. He's dealing with all that in the process. And they rebound and they find it and they go on this magical run. They win 10 of 11 games in the postseason. They win the College World Series, and T.J. McCants, the outfielder I mentioned, is hugging his mother in Omaha. She passed away a couple months later. There were so many things, that element, and so many people involved where real life stuff was taking over that Ole Miss had beaten Arkansas to move to the finals against Oklahoma. And I contacted Neil White, who published the current book, and I said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a book." And he goes, "Well, I do too, but don't jinx it. Shut up and call me next week if they win." And I said, "Okay, fine." So I called him the next week and he says, "Hey, I think you are on to something, but you got to really hurry." And his point was, I met with him for lunch. I think Jeff was with us, and he handed me the book of another author. And I said, "Is this inspiration?" He goes, "Yeah, but not in the way you think." He goes, "This guy took too long to write that story. And once he missed the holiday season, the book was obsolete. We got into the next year. So I did all original reporting for that story and had to write the entire book in 60 days.
Wow.
It had to get to the editors and the publishers in 60 days. I did my first interview on July 5th. I talked to Keith Carter, the athletics director, and the book was in stores on September the 29th. So that was the turnaround on that. So for this book, it was more about getting it right. We even delayed our deadline a couple times to make sure we really focused in on certain aspects and talked to the right people. That other one was just a sprint. You were just trying to make sure that you told it correctly and well, but it was nowhere near the same process.
That's a whole other story in itself right there. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I just to piggyback on what he said was, I was not involved in that 60-day book that he did, so thank goodness. But I worked on one at that point too with Neil White, the editor, the publisher that published our most recent book, and it was more of a photo book. The photographer for Ole Miss and some other people put a book together, and I simply had to do some short stories. Most of them I had already written, either at the regional, the super regional, or in Omaha. So, that was a completely different situation than this. But we had already started thinking about this book. You start thinking about those kind of things, and maybe it takes a little while to get to this point. But we knew we wanted to do another book like the one we've done now. Didn't really know. Maybe we could do it in a couple of years, but it took this long. And then Ole Miss had a good season this past season, which helped kind of get everybody back in the right mindset. So I think the timing on it was good.
What advice would you have, say, if anybody's thinking about writing a book or anything like that? What advice would you guys have other than don't do it? No, I'm kidding. But,
well, I was not going to say don't do it, but I'm going to say one thing, then I'm going to turn it over to Chase. If you think you're going to make a lot of money, just enjoy the writing part because with the hours you put in on something like this, and I'm not saying you can't make money. There's a guy named John Grisham who is from this area too that has made a lot of money writing books. But that's one thing that our publisher Neil White, I went to some book conferences that he put on, some workshops, I guess. But it's not about the money. It's about doing what you love and writing a book and writing stories and. So start with that. If you like to write, or if you have a story to tell, or if you know one that you want to tell of somebody else's, that's where you start, and then you try to figure out if you can make some money or not.
Read a lot, because if you read, you start figuring out things, the ways you want to tell it. There's two parts to it. One is just do it. If it's something that's on your head and you can't let it go, because here's the truth: it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's hard. It's mentally draining. It's one of those deals where if you can put it down and be okay, you probably don't want to write it badly enough, because you have to really want to do it. But if you're at that point, just go for it. I mean, I'm scared to death. I mean, I've told some people my next book is fiction. I don't know how to write fiction. I have no idea, but I'm doing it. I'm working on it. We're going to see what happens. I have no preconceived notions, but here we are. Once it gets written, the technology today, and this goes for a lot of things. This goes for podcasts or anything else. It's really easy to get something out there. Now, it's really hard to get anybody to read it or to make money off of it, but it's really easy to do. So Kindle, they have a company, Amazon has a company called KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. It's free. You can just simply upload manuscripts. They are available on Amazon. If anybody wants to buy it, it's there to buy. It's actually what I did for my first book, because Neil White told me it was still coming out of the pandemic to some extent, and he said, I can't get the paper necessary as fast as you need to turn this thing around. So he helped me a ton with editing, and we hired a layout person and all that. But as far as the actual publishing process, it was technically self-published because I used KDP. I ordered all the author copies, sent them to stores myself, and then at the same time, Amazon's printing the book. So if you bought from Amazon, it went directly from them to the consumer. Okay. Yeah, so KDP is an excellent resource if you are at that point.
Gotcha. Well, you kind of hinted at what's next. Of course, Renaissance, a big sponsor. Got to get that plug in for us here. Yeah. Renaissance Bank, find out what's next. RenaissanceBank.com. What's next?
I hope I'm not covering a coaching search in about a month. That's immediately what's next from a football standpoint. Yeah, book-wise, I'm slowly getting through a fiction book that I've had in my head for a really, really long time. I don't know dates. I don't know when it's coming, but it's something that, as I said, I have to do it mentally. So that's where we are at this point. But beyond that, just working on podcasts, and I've only been at my current job now from a website side for about 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it is. So still building, still getting used to some new after 15 years at the old place. So that's kind of what I've got going on.
Yeah.
What's next? There's a book signing in Memphis. There's a book signing in Jackson. There's a book signing Nashville. We're having, those are the next things. And beyond that, I really hadn't given a whole lot of thought to another book yet. And I write some, and I've gotten some folders of things that I might put together for some things. But unlike Chase, I've never really been as interested in doing a fiction book as I have nonfiction or fact book or true book or whatever you want to say. I don't know that. I'm not saying I won't ever do that, but so for now, I'm just enjoying coming to places like ICC and sharing this book with you guys. So we'll look ahead later.
I like it. Well, let's shift gears for a second. And Chase, let's talk about your time here at ICC. Tell us a little bit about your background and what made you pick ICC.
Number one, it was close, and that's not a bad thing. Just proximity. Wanted to be close to home for myriad reasons. And it offered a lot of things. I was able to get scholarships and different things. I was sports editor, the chief, and as mentioned, and it fit me in so many different aspects, and probably in ways that I didn't realize at the time, and maybe didn't realize till years later, because I told the story speaking to the Humanities Club, but I knew I wanted to be a writer really early. I read through all the newspapers and tried to mimic people's writing. I became obsessed with Greg Ellis's writing when he was covering Ole Miss for the Daily Journal, and I even asked him for feedback when I was a teenager at times, and he gave it. It was one of those things that still touch me to this day. But as I told the Humanities Club, I walked into the Amory Advertiser at the time. Beth Bunch was the editor, and all I had was a 3.5 essay on Thanksgiving that Amy Jo had graded and give me a 99 because she told me there were no perfect essays, so I didn't get 100 on it. And she said, and Beth goes, okay. I mean, at that point, they had one sports writer. It was a guy named Mark Dorsey, and he wrote everything on a legal pad, I think, and Beth typed it in. It was kind of a weird setup. And the next day, I'm covering Legion baseball, and I'm kind of off and running, even though I have no idea what I'm doing. And I continued to do that, and it taught me a ton throughout high school. But getting to ICC gave me so many more opportunities to understand media, understand writing, and challenge myself. You know, I got curious because I think when you first start doing it, you do it just simply because, hey, I love sports and I like writing, and this sounds like a really, really cool job. And then you go, okay, but what's the next thing? And the next thing is, how are people affected? That's the story of all this. Is again, something I told the club. I'm trying not to completely go over myself here, but no matter what you do, no matter if you're in PR or journalism or any communications, it's completely about the people. You are trying to tell what happened to them, why they are impacted, and what they do next. That is absolutely what mattered. And at the direction of Donna Thomas and people at ICC, I was given so many opportunities for that. I mean, I can remember, for some reason, I got really hung up on disability access around campus. And Donna goes, well, why don't you try to see what it's really like? So as a freshman, I found a wheelchair, and for a day, I went to class in a wheelchair all day and went all around campus in a wheelchair, and I documented what that was like. Ended up winning a Mississippi Press Association award later in the year. But we were able to actually elicit change off that and figure out ways that could be, in a cost-efficient way, help people with disabilities or different things. And I think that has stuck with me for so long of, hey, stop just writing to write, or writing from a standpoint of, hey, I need 400 words and I need it quickly, and let's just jot it down and put a bunch of stats down. Stop. Is a parent impacted by this? Even in sports. You know, I think so often students, when they're writing about sports, they go, okay, here's the score, and this guy had 4 hits, and this guy had whatever, and you go, okay, take a step back. Yeah, but what's it matter? What does it mean? Is his mother in the stands nervous and has all these superstitions, or is this matter to him because his grandmother's sick? What is that next thing? And I still remind it to myself, but that's something that ICC taught me through its journalism program, through the Chieftain, through Donna, and that I absolutely has impacted not just my writing, but my books, and hopefully even the podcast, because you're still telling stories and talking to people.
One thing I want to ask on a personal note here. So similar background you and I have, coming through my TV 7 days. I'll go back and watch some of my old broadcasts and listen to myself. I'm just like, my Lord, how did I make it this far in life? But now, seeing where I'm at now, how did you get better? Or when did you notice, or when did you start seeing that, like, hey, I can do this?
I mean, I was really bad. I mean, my mother probably still has all the clippings from when I would use all these analogies and play on words, and it was awful. I can't go back and read it. I'm like you. If I find any of my early writing, it's really bad. It's through school. I mean, I can say all these different things and all these different reasons, but through ICC and Ole Miss, I learned structure. I learned through reading. I started figuring out things that other people did that I could mimic, and not just copy, but mimic. You start figuring it out, and how can I relate that to the different story? But it's all about reps. It's just about curiosity. Look, I have a little bit of a controversial thing that I don't know. Our English teachers are probably about to really yell at me. I don't know if you can teach somebody to write, but I know you can teach somebody who can write a little bit to write much better and really become proficient in it. There's a difference. There's a rhythm to it, and not everybody has that gene. But again, that's okay. I failed college algebra like 4 times. Okay, so like we've all got the thing. We all have the thing that Linda Partlow saved my life. Okay, yes. So it's one of those deals where not everybody's gifted in that, but you start picking up rhythms and things, and you start just looking at it. And if you're really honest to yourself, hey, I can do this, or I can get better, and this makes sense. And no, I just learned it by doing. I learned it from working with people like Jeff and covering games with better people. You gotta realize, I mean, from a straight sports thing, and I don't want to get overly specific for what I do, but press box etiquette. You're in the press box. What is the person that you really respect? What are they doing every day? How are they going about their job? What are they writing? How are they figuring out what to write? How many words are they writing? You start learning all those things, and you start taking things from them, because, it's one of the key things I was told really early on by Wright Thompson, who works for ESPN, is he said, hey, if you're ever in a place where everybody's interviewing the same person, you're in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And his point was, quit copying everybody else. Find that different thing. And I tell a lot of students that work with me or interns now, when you're covering a baseball game or a football game, you've got the big picture of what happened, but find that one moment that personifies that in some way. Maybe it's a pitcher coming off the mound, giving a high five or something, or he goes off in the corner of the dugout with somebody. You have to find some imagery that is going to start to tell the story you're actually trying to tell. And I think when I started thinking about it from that way is when I got better.
Now, you've already name dropped a few people here, and of course, one of those being Donna Thomas, still here at the college. I think if we were to look at her fingerprint over so many people that she's influenced over her time, we'd have a 3-day podcast on that. But who are some people while you were here at ICC that really made a positive impact on your life, both as a writer but as in general?
Donna's by far number one. Believed in me, gave me so many opportunities, pushed me to not be timid. I think, as I said, it's one of my messages that I gave students earlier today is don't be scared of no. So often we're terrified of hearing no. We think that's bad. No is just information. That's all no is. It tells you what to move forward, how to move forward, and what you do from there. And Donna was always pushing certain stories on me. She was always pushing things as far as, hey, why don't you try this or do this or what's next? And, really picking up from what Amy Jo did when I was in high school. And I can't still to this day thank her enough for that, because it does. It gets students out of their comfort zone in such a good way. And I think that's what she was able to do. And then, I name drop the same person, and I'll say it. And, God rest her soul, Linda Partlow, who I was terrified. I was taking college algebra, and I was really bad at it, and I needed it to get to Ole Miss. And this is true. I'm embarrassed. I said this on a podcast earlier this week. I took a college algebra test, took it, and made a 0. Not that I missed it. I took it and made a 0. And I walked up to her and said, hey, I've got a problem. She goes, yes, you do. Absolutely. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? And I found a tutor, and she goes, just work at it and let's see. And she kept me going and kept me going and kept me going. And I found a tutor, worked for me really, really hard all thing. And she walked up to me after the last test, and I'd made an 89 on the last test and did it for real. And she said, hey, are you going to ever want to drive a spaceship? And I said, no, I promise. She goes, engineer? I went, nope, not at all. I was like, I'm trying to write. She goes, congratulations, you can go to Ole Miss now, and gave me a C in the class, and we all moved on. But it's what it is about ICC, is what I said earlier, is they just really care. And that's not to be discounted. That's not something that I'm saying is perfunctory in any way. It really matters, and we have a lot of students, I think, and alumni that would say that. And, when you're here, you get so many opportunities that are very similar to what you would get at a Division I school or a state school or things like that. But there's also small enough to get that hands-on, one-on-one, where somebody really tries to shepherd you through it. And I think that, that shows you where one person really challenged me, but then the other person gave me access in a way to move forward to something that I, was really passionate about.
Well, there may be something some of the students in here are getting ready to do next is make that transition from ICC to the next college. Of course, you went to Ole Miss. How did ICC help prepare you for that step? Because it's a big step.
Yeah, it gave me a lot of confidence from a journalism standpoint to go to the Daily Mississippian and go to the Ole Miss student paper and feel like I belonged, feel like that I wasn't, completely out of my element and I was going to get left out and things along those lines. And then, from a straight curriculum standpoint, I learned a ton. It was different than high school. It teaches you how to study and how to prepare and do all the things that we would talk about every single day. But most of it matured me. I just got better. I got more mature. I understood what I wanted to do. It gave me a place that I could figure those things out, because I think had I gone straight, I wouldn't have been ready for that. I would have been completely sort of bulldozed just mentally. And I think that middle step and getting that confidence was something that prepared me to, move into some student journalism roles and do some of those things very quickly. Because at one point, I actually got really obsessed with the 2004 presidential election and thought I wanted to go into political science in law school. I switched my major for a semester until I actually worked at a law firm one summer and then realized that absolutely wasn't what I wanted to do. So I went back into journalism. But no, it was a great opportunity to develop clips, develop ways to get sources, but really just walk into rooms and know that, hey, I belong enough that I'm not scared to be in here right now.
So after you graduated Ole Miss, and this is for somebody that's also been in this line of work, it's incredibly hard to get a firm foundation. But how did you get that firm foundation? How did you know that this is what I want to do professionally for the rest of my life?
I don't know that I officially knew it until I failed one more time. I got hired by Jeff right out of college, as we said earlier. I walked out of the Student Media Center at Ole Miss. I sat in his car. He handed me a yellow legal pad that had some rudimentary contract numbers on it. And he said, "Hey, how cheap will you do this?" And I said, "Really cheap." And he goes, "Okay, you're hired. Great. That's what we're going to do." I said, "Good enough." So
You can write, and
yeah,
you
that's
don't,
what it was.
You don't really need any money.
Well, as he told me earlier today, really it was just because you were there. I went, "Well, great. That's awesome. That helped."
Hey, you come here. You're
Yeah,
hired.
there's some truth to that. But I worked for him for a year and a half, and I got an opportunity that I thought was a phenomenal opportunity with ESPN. And they were creating a competitor to the Ole Miss Spirit, which is where I was at the time in the website space. And they promised you all these things. They promised you that we had this great revenue streams, and here's how you're going to make all this money, and we're getting into space. Here's the catch: you had to build the website yourself. You had to pay out the money on the front end yourself for the website. End up borrowing money from the family and all this stuff. And I think, oh, I'll pay that back. And here's the business plan I'm turning in, and we're going to be making $400,000 a year in a year, and this is going to be awesome. I had no idea what I didn't know. I did not realize how lost I was in every single way. My business partner and I, really after 3 or 4 months, knew it wasn't going to work, and it was almost a race to see who got out first. And I remember I was walking out of an LSU Ole Miss basketball game, and I called Neil McCready, who's been my coworker now for over 15 years. And I said, "Hey, do you have anything? Can I do anything? Because if I even don't make $1, it's better than losing $1. And that's where I'm at right now, where I'm just seeing it go and go and go and go. And very similar to Jeff, he goes, "Hey, it's probably just going to be peanuts, but sure, we'll try to figure something out." And at that point, I was contemplating getting out of the profession. I was contemplating things in different lines of communication and PR. I was considering sports information jobs. I didn't know what was next. I really had no idea. I didn't know if I might have to move away. And he gave me a lifeline. And within a year, I was making a more reasonable salary. One of the other employees with Rivals and Yahoo at the time had moved away or been let go from the position. And then we started the podcast about, I guess, 24 months after that, and our lives changed at that point. But no, look, I was 26 years old and still didn't know exactly what was there. Sometimes you have to take a step back to figure it out. It's not always going to be linear where you're just moving up and up and up and soar and soar and soar. And I think for me, it took really readjusting my expectations, because I was cocky. I was confident as a college kid even. I mean, I started writing for a newspaper at 16 years old, and you think, oh, I know it all, and I'm good, and we're just going to whatever, and get beat down pretty good. You can't pay your bills, and suddenly, hey, what are we doing? And we have to find something else. We just have to find a way to survive. And I think getting that opportunity and taking a step back, it probably even made me better, because it reset a lot of things before things did turn around. And get
of course, he was in
quickly.
competition with us after he started that other website. But
So yes, I was getting crushed.
Notice he
saying.
didn't call us back. He didn't want to go back to work with us. He had moved on past that. But yeah, and I think we'd already hired somebody who's still in the business too. But anyway, another story for another day.
Well, what's been the key to your success and longevity so far?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I feel like other people probably have to answer that in some ways. I've been curious. I haven't been scared of failure. I feel like, again, I'm repeating a lot of tenets from earlier, and I told the story. What got my career started was I wasn't worried about hearing no. I walked into Beth Bunch's office, and it was going to be okay, and no, what's the worst that can happen is they simply tell you no, and you're right back where you were when you started. And for a really long time, I took on those new opportunities. We started a podcast when nobody was doing podcasts in Mississippi. We had no idea if anybody was going to listen. It was rudimentary. We couldn't even edit the intro out that had some little ad weird thing in the beginning of who the source was for the podcast. We were amazed when the first person wanted to pay money to listen to sponsor on the podcast. It was Pro Bull Riding. They were coming to Tupelo, and they said, "Hey, let's do this." And we had we got a cowboy on named Billy Robinson who was trying to ride Bushwhacker. Wright had written a story on Bushwhacker, this unrideable bull, and we were playing into that from the podcast. And we got our first major sponsor with Blue Skies, which Oxford Exxon and all the with Ben Craddock and his family. And we met on campus, and we walked out, and we said, "Oh my God, we fleeced him. We took so much from him." And he called us, a week later, and goes, "I would have paid 3 times that. Y'all are idiots." And we're like, "Okay, we had no idea what we were doing." But point is of all that, we were pushing, and we were trying new things, and we just didn't care. We were good with hearing failure and no, because there is no negative to it. If there's one thing you take from any of this, that's the thing you take, is that no does not matter at all. You move on to the next thing. And as I told them earlier, I lost that somewhere along the way. We kind of rested on our laurels. We didn't keep pushing. We became the most listened to podcast network in Mississippi by 2016, 2017, something like that. We thought we had it made, and the pandemic hits. And when the pandemic hits, I've got several things going through my mind. Is I have a sports podcast and there are no sports. Well, that's a problem. What do I do? How do we do this every day? Because I have two sets of constituents that I have to really worry about. I have listeners who are dealing with whatever the pandemic is bringing to them at the time. And how do I help them forget about all the negatives for an hour? For an hour a day, how do I make their lives a little better? And then the other side, I have all these sponsors. Well, A, I need them to keep sponsoring, but B, they've got businesses that are in trouble. They're worrying about how are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to do all this family stuff? And I said, okay, let's forget sports for a minute. If I don't have anything to do, they probably don't have anything to do either, get potential guests. So I created a list of 25 names across entertainment, music, all these different things. And I said, hey, I'm just going to ask them to be on the podcast. Who knows? Whatever. What do I have to lose? 19 of the 25 said yes, including one of my favorite authors, all these different people. And suddenly you're having interesting conversations, you're networking, you're doing all these different things with these people. And it sort of saved our podcast. We did not fall off as much as a lot of people fell off during them. But what it did more than that was reinvigorate me mentally to think, okay, see what happened there. You became curious again. You became not afraid of failure or no again. So keep pushing in those ways. And I hope that that's something that continues to resonate with me, because I think that's what's provided longevity is simply, if a show doesn't work, that's fine. We move on to the next one. If this doesn't work, there's tomorrow. It's all good. To have thick skin and just go, okay, it's just one little piece of a much larger body of work.
Yeah, that's one thing we try to teach our work studies, Raphael, and everyone that's part of the sports information team here, is it's not a failure if you learn a lesson. Mm-hmm. You can apply that lesson to the next time and then just get better and better from there. We're going to wrap things up real quick. Before we do, we're going to talk about the future of college sports. Now, we're not going to dig into the NIL and all that madness. But
let's
also,
do that. That's good. That's
also, but the sports journalism side of things. We've all been in this for over 20 years, and my goodness, the change over the last 5 years has been more than the change of the previous 15. Mm-hmm. But let's just, I guess, discuss some of the biggest changes you guys have seen in the world of sports journalism.
I'm just going to say one thing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Chase. I used to hold a newspaper in my hands when I started, so it's all changed since then.
Yes. Yeah.
No, but I guess really he has too. But I've been through so many different levels of what you do to get to this point. When I was working at the Ole Miss Spirit, which is now only a website, obviously. We would print on Mondays. We would go to the Oxford newspaper and print. We would bag them up. We would take them to the post office and throw bags and pick up. And it was so different then. But now, I'm a little bit out of all of that. So that's why I'm going to turn it back over to Chase, because as far as, him knowing what the future of this is, really it's what's now and what's coming up, and if you can predict things. But I've seen all of those changes, and again, he has to for the most part.
Yeah, we could spend hours on this, but the two things that I think are the most relevant to change in sports journalism is, number one, the journalist, the person matters more than the publication for the first time ever. I gave an example earlier of back in the day, and not really that long ago, if you work for the New York Times is what carried weight, or whatever the publication was. You create it to your own area, and you had access and you had all this respect simply because you worked for that place. Well, look, number one, media literacy is worse than ever, just as far as the public. And that goes for two reasons. That's one is we don't read as well as we used to, and two, the journalism is bad across the country in ways that it wasn't. Where the person is now the brand. And I say brand loosely because I don't want you to think I'm talking about influencing or anything like that. But what I am saying is people are focused on the people they want to read, and they search out even people inside publications at this point. So if you're going into this field, you have to be aware that you need to be very smart about your social media presence. Say things only in ways that you want to. Don't put anything out on Twitter or Instagram that you would not write in your publication. Make that the same. Copying, editing, the whole deal. Do not change in what you do there. And then two, remember that people are following you across platforms. So look, I think the worst advice ever that journalists get is, hey, just simply try to have a little bit of everything and don't worry about specializing. Just do it all. Sure, know how to do it all, but be really good at something. Find that thing that's your passion, make that your primary, and then have some understanding. Because if you're a writer, you're going to have to do podcast interviews. You're going to have to be on video some. You're going to have to be on social media. Look, there is no more, hey, we're going to go file the story. We don't have to worry about it till the next morning. You're on call to some degree 24 hours a day. So be aware of your brand, be aware of what you're doing, and understand that I need to understand how to tell each story from a little bit of all different mediums. And that there is something that's to that. And then two, I don't think in college athletics you can be a good reporter unless you understand some semblance of business today. There's just too many things going on between NIL and rev share or collective bargaining agreements in professional sports. Take your pick. Frankly, even in high school and prep reporting, there's business elements now that there weren't there 10, 15 years ago. You're going to have to be somewhat all-encompassing. You don't have to be an expert, but ask questions. Find people that are experts. Interview them. Ask them questions. Write stories with experts giving you answers. You're going to have a basic understanding of the business elements because we are no longer in a world where sports journalism is about just simply who wins and who's next at this point. If you cannot tell the business side to some degree, you can't educate your listenership in any way or readership in any way.
Can I give you one more throwback story?
Absolutely.
Y'all got time for one more? This is how far back I've seen it change, but this is still how current I think the people that I'm about to mention are involved in. Who watched, I guess it was last night, anybody watch the Monday Night Football game? I know there was the World Series on and other things too, but anybody watch the Manning cast ever on the other, whatever ESPN platform it is? So in 1994, in January, I was pretty new at the Oxford Eagle, and Peyton Manning was about to decide where to go to college. And so Gene Phelps, who was at the time sports editor of the Tupelo paper, and many of y'all know him, my editor sent me and Gene together. Gene was going, and I jumped in and went with him. But just to get to this point of the story, I don't have to go through everything else, but to tell you how crazy, and in a way, I think as you get older, it seems like a short time ago. Hello, Chris Burris. Talking about Gene Phelps right now. Gene and I left to go to Peyton's press conference in New Orleans. It was going to be the next day. We left, drove down, spent the night, got up the next morning. Archie Manning was going to call on to the radio station WWL in New Orleans and tell everyone where Peyton was going. So this was the world back then. And again, Peyton's still, he's still fairly young to me, but, I know he's not, but he's close. So we hear on the radio that Peyton is going to Tennessee. No cell phones, no anything, no instant information at all. We pull off at the next convenience store we see where there are two payphones. Anybody know what a payphone is? He calls the Daily Journal. I call the Oxford Eagle. I just, that's how much things have changed in a relatively short period of time for a lot of people in this room because, Peyton's still hanging around doing a lot of things. And just one of the stories that I kind of can put in perspective what I've seen. And then Chase can take it from here to this point after, and tell you exactly what or precisely what he thinks is going to happen in the future.
Say, Story Time with Uncle Gene has always been the podcast I have pitched to Gene Phelps, but he will not do it. But I'm going to twist his arm and eventually get it done.
Tell him I'll jump in once a month with him or something.
It's a done deal. Good lead into that. So what's next? What do you think the next big thing is when it comes to not only sports journalism but journalism itself?
There's 10. Navigating AI. I don't want to get too far deep into it, and I was asked a great question about it during the Humanities Club meeting because, look, deep fakes and fake photos and fake videos are only going to get more aggressive. They're only going to get better. There's a bit of an attack on creators in general because of that, because it's so easy to fake things and to not use talented people for the things that they have their craft in. Major League Baseball, or sorry, the Associated Press for years now has been using AI to write Major League Baseball recaps, where no human writes it. The ad gets completely done by Associated Press, by Chat GPT, not GPT, but AI, just simply tabulating the specific statistics and putting them into a broad-based inverted pyramid story. It's not hurting us as far as my work. I mean, I do podcasts. Nobody's going to be able to necessarily copy that in the same way. But my information goes into these systems and gets, used to teach AI in a lot of ways. And it does educate them and ChatGPT in different ways like that. But no, I think it is very much of, we've got to be really careful, and we've got to educate our students on not, I use this phrase, it's a tool, it's not a crutch. There's a difference. We have to know how to do things. We have to know how to do them well. And then if we do that, maybe it can be a time saver. Maybe it can be something that does assist us, but we can't jump all the way to there. We've still got to really sharpen those skills. We've got to be good listeners. Listen, listen, listen. It's the number one skill out there, is listening. It's not talking. It's not writing. It's not doing anything, but it's hearing our fellow person. Because look, I do it too. I am addicted to my cell phone. But so many students out there, I'm sure you're talking to somebody and you're either looking at your phone while you're talking to them, or you're listening only enough where you can start saying what you want to say again. You're not stopping and taking a pause and hearing for the follow-up or the feedback. And I think that there is, frankly, an opportunity in some ways for the students that really focusing on those soft skills and the listening and the writing and staying to their craft. They're going to jump so far ahead of some people who are trying to cheat the system, because look, it's still going to be a creative business. But we have to be very, very careful that we don't take easy way outs with AI, and that we manipulate our systems and how we do content simply because it's there and it's easy or it's cheaper. And I think that's the thing that is next, that scares me, depending on what part of communications and what part of media you're in, is what do we have to be aware of? What do we have to be fearful of? And then also what can help us? And we don't know the answers to that, because we don't know where this is going to stop, or when certain businesses see it pop from an investment standpoint or not pop from an investment standpoint. And I think every day we're learning in that way. I use it a little bit for some different things, but I make sure that I am very efficient and proficient in those things before I touch it or let it do anything for me.
Yeah, as you said, it is a very easy crutch to fall on, especially when you've got 7 games in a week and you're tired and you got 7 more staring you down the barrel. So, guys, before we take questions from the crowd, any final thoughts?
Jeff?
It's just been an honor to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation and Chase's old grounds over here, this is so different than most of the book signings that we go to, that this, after having taught some classes at Ole Miss in fairly recent years, this is important, and this is good that we're here with you guys, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Take advantage of your opportunities. You're at a great place to meet people and to network and connect. Go to the events, go to the speakers, use them, start building the Rolodex, send the emails. And then you're going to call me old, you're going to laugh at me. If you take one thing outside of listening, take that first, but write thank you notes. Handwritten thank you notes. They go an incredibly long way. It matters. Nobody does it anymore, and you move up 5-6 levels simply by writing a thank you note. Get an address and send a note.
Yep. It's one thing I always say, thank you is the 2 powerful words that we don't use enough today. So, guys, thank y'all for being part of this. So we are going to open the floor to questions. So does anybody have any questions for us? Yes.
Regarding AI, and you said use it, as a crutch and not, or use it as an aid, not a crutch. How do you find that fine line?
Good question.
What are you trying to do with it? Be honest with yourself, and then say, if I had all the time in the world, could I do it without that? Could I find a way to do it another method? Because here's the problem, and here's the issue, is that if the answer is no, the problem is that you don't know if it's right or wrong. You have no idea whether it's actually correct in what it did for you, especially if it's finding information. Like if it's finding information or something like that, then it's just spitting something out. It might not be updated. It might not know the nuances of what you're asking. So much of the key is, if I just have all the time in the world, could I do this, and could I do it as well as it's going to do it? And why am I actually using it? Is it laziness? Is it lack of time? Or where that is. Like one example that I like it, but I feel confident in my own ability, is that Adobe runs an AI tool that allows you to edit podcasts, clean up audio, remove background noise, and do all those things. And I use it pretty often. But I still go in, check it, make sure everything doesn't have weird cartoon sounds or anything like that in it. But if you give me 20 minutes, I could do probably a better job or the same job just using Audition with my knowledge of editing tools. So that's the catch, is figuring out, am I using this simply because I don't want to take the time to do it myself?
All right. Good question, by the way. Anyone else?
One of my favorite pieces of sports writing is According to Marcus Dupree by Willie Morris. I'm just curious about how you guys have a special. I'm not a sports writer. I'm an attorney. But, so I do a lot of writing. It's a different style, of course. But when I think of entertaining, but especially being a Mississippi native, do you have a piece of sports writing that you think epitomizes the spirit of Willie Morris in the sense that you give a story, you can touch on the background of it, the family members, but also address, at that time, still a popular sport, nothing like today, but college football in the 1970s?
Well, Willie Morris is in our book, so that helps there. There's not a story in there by him, but he's deceased. But there is some mention of him in a couple of different stories in there by people. As far as you mean, like something that I would. Is there a story or something that I've read that I would?
Well, something I guess you would recommend. Chase mentioned a piece being beyond the box score, simply here's what happened and here's the outcome. But the why, I think that book did a great job of digging into Marcus Dupree's why, his family's why he may have events unfolded the way he did under the Barry Switzer in Oklahoma. That deep driving beyond the playing field.
Probably my favorite sports book, which at the time was the number one selling sports book of all time in the world, was John Feinstein's A Season on the Brink, which was way before any of you guys, but it was in the late 1980s, and he followed one entire season or really a year, or maybe almost a year, of Indiana basketball with Coach Bobby Knight, and he let him have complete access to everything that was going on around the program. I think Coach Knight kind of hated him after the whole thing was over but that resonated with me because of the depth of the book, or the depth of the coverage and what he was able to write, and that you got to know these people completely. So that was always one of my favorite books. But anything like that really exposes lots of depth or lots of insight to other. But it's really hard for me to pick out one or two things that I really like, that I've read over the years that really stand out. Chase?
Yeah, you're going to find the sport weird when I say this, but maybe one of my favorite journalism, magazine, news story type pieces is a Sports Illustrated story called Pure Something, and maybe Pure Heart, and it's the story of Secretariat when he was passing away in the late 80s, early 90s, the racehorse. And it goes into all the background of why that wasn't just a horse that was the best horse ever. It was the family dynamics and all the issues of how we got there. It's really, really good because it's long and it's thorough, and it tells way beyond the story of just a horse that won a Triple Crown. And then the book, and this is going to be a random one. I don't know if anybody in here has read this. It's called Confederacy of Silence, and it's by Richard Rubin. He was from the Northeast. He couldn't find a job out of college, and he moved because it was the only job he could get to run the sports section of the newspaper in the Mississippi Delta in Greenwood. And he covered a guy that ended up signing with Ole Miss, Handy Campbell, back in the 80s. He was this godsend of a quarterback in the Mississippi Delta. They played Tupelo and Todd Jordan in the playoffs. And the first part of the book is Richard adjusting to the American South and following Handy and understanding the impact of him on the community and what this football team and these people meant to the community. And the second half of the book is years later, he gets a call and goes back to Mississippi because Handy Campbell has been charged with murder. And it follows the case and how he got here and what it looks like. And it is a long piece. It's a long book, but it is a fabulous book of journalism, sports journalism, and why sports resonate back into everyday and real life and what that means for people. It's awesome.
Good question. Anyone else? Yep.
I got one for each. The first one's for Chase.
Uh-huh.
Since this is your home, how about 4 or 5 teachers that made a difference in your life? I realize
You're already late. We already asked that question earlier. You're late. If you'd been here on time, Chris, we would have covered this. And then,
because I was doing your job at Ole Miss.
I mean, aren't you retired? What are we doing? Where are you at? I mean,
Press conference over there.
Yeah.
You're right, Jeff. All right, then number 2. You're both published in baseball. You're very familiar, you're very accomplished in that. Could you name maybe the 2 or 3 best players that you played with? And then maybe the 2 or 3 best players you played against? Or maybe 2 or 3 players that you saw during your time at Ole Miss, didn't have to be Ole Miss players, that you thought, oh, they're going to make it to the show. And for Jeff,
My baseball career ended in 6th grade, so I don't think that. I can't remember.
yeah, no one knows more Ole Miss. No one's more deep in the history of Ole Miss. But I'm sure there are a lot of Mississippi State people here. What would you tell Mississippi State people about the state of their program and the state of their athletics from the outside looking in?
Go ahead, Jeff. Take that one. Go ahead. Hey, I'm all ears, Jeff. Go ahead.
Well, I've already quoted Duty Noble and his appreciation for coaching at Ole Miss. But I don't know. I mean, I think the thing I'd say right now is that, it was pretty yeah, there are ups and downs. Ole Miss is at the top of its game right now. State may be struggling some, but we've seen it flip, or at least I have. I've been around long enough. One will go up, one will go down. Sometimes they're good at the same time. But I'll give you an example of one thing that probably people in here really, many of you might not know, that the Southeastern Conference basically started in this state. The first office of the Southeastern Conference, which we all know and love, was in Jackson. And I went down in 2019 for a marker, an historical marker unveiling downtown Jackson at the home office of the Southeastern Conference that was there from 1940 to 1948. And the first commissioner was a former governor of Mississippi. At that event that day was Mark Keenum, the president of Mississippi State, and the chancellor of Ole Miss, Glenn Boyce, and the athletic directors at each place. My point is, we're all tied into this state together. I mean, we've been through a lot. We're all going to go through some more. There's an Egg Bowl coming up pretty soon that I may or may not go to. But, I mean, to answer your question, that is not the question you asked. But, we all have things to be proud of in Mississippi. And, Mississippi State wins a baseball championship in 2021. Ole Miss wins it in 2022. Enough said.
To your question, well, when I was a freshman in high school, Bill Hall, who ended up having a pretty good major league career from Nettleton, hit a ball about 450 feet off of me over a bunch of trees, and you went, yeah, he's better than me at this. He's really good. He's probably going to play somewhere pretty good all day. He's on the same team with Jeffrey Ray at Nettleton. They were together. Kennard Springer on that team. Some names back in the day. But the player that still to this day that I do have some relationship with, and I think when I came up and what it meant to cover really good teams, and he's still going. He's had a heck of a postseason in the year with the Chicago Cubs this year is Drew Pomeranz. You knew from the very beginning that Drew was going to be special. He was really good to me when I was still very young. He ended up finishing second for the Golden Spikes Award, which is the Heisman Trophy for college baseball, to Bryce Harper, who still is having quite the professional career. Bryce was a junior college player, but still won the Golden Spikes for best amateur baseball player in the country. He beat Drew by 1 vote. But having a guy like that who was known as the best pitcher in the country, having access to him for stories, him treating you well, it showed. I'll tell you what it did is it showed the human element of if he was good to you and you could have reasonable conversations, no other player probably deserved to not be reasonable at the same time. It almost taught you a little bit of, hey, it might be his problem if I have an issue. And then, you didn't ask a player, and you mentioned teachers, and it's not a teacher, and it's not at ICC, but Mike Bianco. I mean, I've covered Mike for 25 years. I've grown up with him. We've come a long way. I think over time he grew to respect me. We're some level of friends and professional acquaintances at this point. And I mean, I'll leave with the story. People, how far I've come. And he teaches you how to ask good questions. Mike is great. When you ask bad questions, he will punish them. When you ask good questions, he will give you credit for them and answer them well. But he always apologizes after the blow up on the bad questions. And it's my second.
Been through
it's happened
that.
to Jeff has walked off in the middle of one of Mike's tirades where Mike looked at me and goes, "Did I piss him off?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so. My hunch is you did."
Only once.
Yeah.
Only one time.
So it's my second year, and I am on the beat. It's 2007. Ole Miss is playing Central Arkansas. And at that time, Central Arkansas was a D2 program transitioning to Division I. They weren't even Division I yet. Ole Miss was ranked number 2 in the country. They were undefeated. They were headed to TCU on the weekend, and they were playing Central Arkansas on a Tuesday. They lost 3-2. We get out there. We're doing the interview, and I lead off with the questions. Said, "Mike, hey, did you guys overlook Central Arkansas today?" Mike looks at
Bad
me, kind of
question.
drops his head down. He goes, "What kind of horse question is that?" And I went, "Oh God, I want to crawl under the mound right now as we're talking." I just put my hand up. "Do you think we just roll our bats and balls out there and it's whatever?" And he's pissed, and he's going on and on and on. He lets me have it. So right after that, Dan Weike, who now covers the Lakers for the Athletic, he worked for Rivals.com covering Ole Miss at the time, and he looks at me and almost kind of grins at me. And he goes, "Hey Mike, so Tuesday, no crowd. You guys a little low on energy today?" It's the correct way to ask that question, by the way. Mike looks at him and goes, "Yes, Dan, that's right. Not that horse way Chase just asked it." And he went back at me again. I'm like, "Oh my God, get me out of here." But here's the catch to that, and here's my point, is that he apologized the next day. And what it teaches you, and this, if you're going into sports journalism, this is a really good lesson, is that yes, coaches need to respect you. You need to respect them. There needs to be a working relationship. You're also asking them questions 5 minutes after some of the worst professional moments of their lives. We don't do that in almost any other occupation. Nobody's talking to you after you write something bad going, "Hey, why'd you write it like that?" and berating you and making you explain it in real time with video cameras in your face. They are human. Understand that. Give them some space. Ask questions appropriately. And be aware that you're going to need some thick skin sometimes, because sometimes, look, here's the truth. If everybody loves you all the time, you're not doing your job. And if everybody hates you all the time, you're not doing your job. There is somewhere in the middle if you're doing it correctly. And part of that is really figuring out that these are people and how do we associate with them on a day-to-day level.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right.
Do you ever feel the responsibilities of storytelling? Like maybe your words shape how people see the players and coaches?
Really good question.
Yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily want to have that level of ego, but you have to be aware of it at the same time. For me, it's not even in my writing as much as the podcast, because from a podcast standpoint, I mean, I'm doing the quick math. I talk about 10 hours a week publicly. And when you're doing that, you kind of let your guard down. You just start having conversations and talking, and sometimes you say something and you don't even realize you said something that maybe wasn't the way you meant for it to come across, or it wasn't what you would say if you really thought about it, because you sort of forget there's a microphone if you're doing it fairly well. And later in the day, somebody will be like, "Hey, why'd you say that?" Or, you get a question, you go, crap, I didn't really mean it that way, or do whatever. So, yeah, and so much of that is just preparation. There is a responsibility. There's a pretty deep responsibility, because you're shaping fans' opinions. If they're reading you or listening to you, then they care what you say, and they sort of mold to some of your opinions a lot of times. But the only way to really guard against that is simply preparation. Like every morning, I have a bunch of newsletters and things that I look through to build podcast topics, and I have a left column that is things I know I have to talk about that day. I've got a middle column that is things that will kind of get me to the next break or the segment, or if I run out a little bit of time. And then there's a third column of just rainy day stuff, where if I'm really struggling and we don't have a topic, I can go to these things and make do. But you want to have sort of some bullets or understandings under each one of them that you can go to where you're not searching for words and getting into a place where you're worried about that. So yes, there's absolutely a responsibility to that. It's one of the problems in today's clickbait society with writing is people just say things because they think it's going to get clicks, whether they have any responsibility to the subjects. It's back to the humanity side of it. And then it's making sure you ask good questions. I don't like people writing down all their questions, because when they do that, sometimes they're not listening to the follow-ups. They're not paying attention. Whereas sometimes just bullet points are things to keep you in reminder. And if you do that, I feel like you're more engaged in the conversation and you're more likely to stay on topic as needed.
Great question. Anyone else? All right. I believe that's got us. Guys, this has been great. I've enjoyed this, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed this as well. Real quick, before I knock our microphone over, did it at the
I've
end.
been doing
I've
it,
been
so it's
waiting
fine.
for all day. I'll let everybody know where they can find out more, follow you guys, and things like that.
Yeah, our podcast network is MPW Digital. We do about half our shows live on YouTube at the same time that we are recording. They're all on audio everywhere you would find podcasts. And then my written work, Rebels247.com, a part of 24/7 Sports and CBS. And I think it's now it's Chase Parham on Twitter, ChaseParham.
Mine's just a couple places now. It's on Twitter, X, at Jeff Roberson, and I don't tweet as much as I used to, and some of it might not even be interesting, but you can check it out. And I write some stories for OleMissSports.com, which is the athletic website at Ole Miss, and they let me do that a few times here and there. So those are really all I've got going right now until, we write another book, I guess.
Next book.
There we go. And if there's any students out there that's interested in sports journalism, sports information department, we're looking for help all the time. So please come by. We're in the community relations building. I'm Adam Gore. You got Raphael Henry, Cal Brown, and some other folks up there. Miss Leah will be the one greeting you at the door. So please come by, because that's how I got started. The Lord has opened a lot of great doors for me along the way, and that's where I'm at today. And I'm truly blessed with what I do. So we would love to play that forward for you guys as well. So, guys, anything else before we cut you loose?
No, just appreciate the day. Appreciate everybody, the ability to come do it. And look, you got my contact out there. Happy for anybody, any students that have questions. If you end up at Ole Miss, opportunities for internships and things, we do that. So grab my email and let's chat if anything's necessary.
All right. Awesome. You guys have a blessed day and roll Tribe.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.